Here, our goal is to simplify this algebraic expression. Notice that we have xy minus 3x plus 4y minus 12 all over 5x plus 20. And this is the expression that we have to simplify. First, let us factorize the top expression. Let us factorize the expression in the numerator. And so we have xy minus 3x plus 4y minus 12. And so we're going to factor this by grouping. Notice that x is a common factor with these two terms. And so we're going to factorize this x. So we have x times y, which is xy, and x times negative 3, which is negative 3x. And so this is factorized good in a great way. And so we're going to notice that this term has 4. So 4 is a factor of 4y, and 4 is also a factor of 12. And so we can factor out the 4. 4 times y is 4y, and 4 times 3 is 12. I'm sorry, 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. And so this is also factorized in a good way as well. Notice that we have y minus 3, which is a factor, we have y minus 3, which is a factor in this term, and y minus 3, which is also a factor in this term. So that means that the two terms have y minus 3, so we could factor out y minus 3. And if we factor out y minus 3, we're left with x plus 4. And so we put that right here, x plus 4 is what we're left with. So that means that the factored form of this expression is y minus 3 multiplied by x plus 4. And so we write that. We say that this expression in factored form is y minus 3 multiplied by x plus 4. And we factorize the denominator as well. So we say, okay, 5 is a factor in 5x, and 5 is also a factor of 20. So we can factor out the 5. And when we factor out the 5, we are left with x plus 4, because 5 times x is still 5x, and 5 times 4 is 20. Now we can cancel out. Notice that we have x plus 4 at the top and we have x plus 4 at the bottom. So we cancel out those two, and so we are left with, on the numerator, we have y minus 3, and in the denominator, we have 5. So the simplified form of this expression is y minus 3 all over 5. Now let's move on to the next part of this question. It says, using your answer from A, simplify this expression. So we have two fractions that we want to divide. All right, we have to divide these two fractions. But they told us to use our answer from A. Remember, when we simplified this expression, our answer was y minus 3 all over 5. And so that means that this expression right here is actually equal to y minus 3 over 5. And so we have this expression divided by this fraction. And so what we do is, instead of writing this expression all over again, we replace it with y minus 3 all over 5, because that's the simplified form of this expression. And so what we actually have is y minus 3 over 5 divided by y squared minus 9 all over xy plus 6x. And so what we're going to do is we're going to factorize this particular expression on top. We could use the difference of two squares. And so when we factor this using the difference of two squares, we get that this expression is equal to y minus 3 and y plus 3. And the reason is because the square root of, so let's show that. So the reason is because the square root of y squared is equal to y, all right? And the square root of 9 is equal to 3, okay? And the difference of two squares tells us that if we have a minus b, right? If we have difference of two squared tells us that, let me write the formula for difference of two squares. That's useful. So difference of two squares formula tells us that if we have a squared, right, minus b squared, then that's equal to a minus b multiplied by a plus b. Okay, that's the difference of two squares formula, all right? which helps us to factorize expressions that looks like this, where you have a term that is squared minus another term that is squared. And the difference of two squares, the difference of two squares formula basically tells us that if you have a term that is squared subtracted by another term that is squared, all you need to do is take the square root of the square root of a squared, which is a, and you take the square root of b squared, which is b, and you subtract those two, so it's going to be a minus b, and then you add those two, and then you get a plus b. And so that's basically what the difference of two squares formula says. You subtract those two terms. So first you find the square root of a squared, which is a. You find the square root of b squared, which is b. Then you subtract them, a minus b, and then you add them, a plus b. And so that's the idea. So if we apply the difference of two squares to y squared minus 9, well, we find the square root of y squared, which is y. We find the square root of 9, which is 3. And so what we have to do, we have to subtract them and we have to add them. So y squared minus 9 is equal to y minus 3 times y plus 3. Now we must factorize the bottom. Notice that x is a factor in both of these terms. And so we can factor out x. And if we factor out x, we get what's left is y plus 6. And we know it's correct because x times y is xy, and x times 6 is 6x. And so what we have is y minus 3 all over 5 divided by y minus 3 multiplied by y plus 3 all over x multiplied by y plus 6. Notice that we are dividing these two fractions, and if we're dividing these fractions, we're going to use this acronym, which is KSF. And KSF stands for keep, switch, flip. We're going to keep this first fraction. We keep it unchanged. We do not change it. We're going to switch the sign from a division sign to a multiplication sign. And we're going to flip this fraction. We're going to, whatever's in the top, we put at the bottom. Whatever's at the bottom, we put at the top. So keep, switch, flip, right? And so that's what we do. So we keep the first fraction, y minus 3 all over 5. We switch the division sign into a multiplication sign, and we flip this fraction. So we put the denominator on top, x times y plus 6, and we put the numerator at the bottom, y minus 3 multiplied by y plus 3. And so we keep, switch, and flip. Next, we can cancel out. So we can cancel out y minus 3 with y minus 3. And so what are we left with? Well, we're left with x times y plus 6 as the numerator, and we are left with at the bottom 5 times y plus 3. And so this is our answer here. This is the simplified answer here. And so this is our answer to this particular question.